My relationship with watches goes back to my teenage years. Born originally out of a innocent curiosity following the steps of my father, who was into mechanical and vintage watches. As with anything that has to do with emotion, love, I don't think you choose it. It's not a rational choice you make. You just fall in love with it. And the same with music, the same with food, and potentially with your friends and your spouse one day. And I was lucky enough to simply enjoy it, to indulge, to discover, and to grow with this field. Thankfully today it is a market that is in growth, but it was never a specific conscious choice. The word collector, to begin with, is one that I have not managed to define for myself since my interest in watches started 30 years ago. On the contrary, I think to define a collector is one of the most difficult words. Example, someone who has 25 watches. Is he a collector, or has he just amassed 25 watches? So I don't think you can define a collector by looking at the property, the selection he owns. I think it's more a state of mind. Do you love and suffer with your hunting, your wearing, your sometimes parting with the watches? Or is it simply a static group of 25 watches that is lacking a theme, that is lacking a style, that did not take you any sacrifices to build it? In that sense, I'm not even sure if I'm a collector. I am always hungry to discover. Thankfully, I can satisfy that hunger in my job by hunting, finding, negotiating, bringing to the market beautiful watches. Certainly, I have more watches than I need. I don't even know how many watches I have. I love wearing them, I love changing them regularly, but it's hand in hand, it's not conflictual. Of course, I cannot afford the top lots, the record smashing watches that Philips is auctioning in recent seasons. It's a beautiful hand in hand, and maybe like a chef, he has a restaurant, but he still needs to eat at home at night, and I will not just eat dry bread for dinner, believe me. To me, it's very important to state that it's not a matter of right or wrong, vintage or contemporary. I understand there has been a misconception here and there out that Aurel is only vintage and is not fond of contemporary. On the contrary, I love discovering new ideas, new talent. Certainly, the independent watchmakers are more courageous than the mainstream big groups, understandably. Clearly, whenever there's a new launch at the SIHH in Geneva, in Basel, or by someone who's hardly ever known, I'm curious, I'm going to look at it, and I will look at it with complete fresh set of eyes and without any prejudice. If I look at my own collection, now I shouldn't use the word collection, I think the minority are contemporary watches, but I do wear contemporary Patek Philippe's, contemporary Jaune, contemporary Laurent Ferrier. I'm very happy to enjoy myself often with my Philippe Dufour. I think there are just beautiful, beautiful creations made in our years, in our decade. When I am often looking at the white metal steel watches, she has been more daring with yellow gold watches at a time when a yellow gold Rolex with a yellow gold bracelet in the late 90s and early 2000s were considered bad taste. It seems the market has more aligned itself with Livia's taste in the last few years than with my taste. We joke about each other's different preferences. The one thing that combines both our tastes is we have never compromised on quality. If we cannot afford a certain model, we say rather not buy it in poor condition than making a compromise that you will regret later. It's important to know that Livia is wearing her watches more than I do. And when I say wearing, she would wear her watches to the beach, she would wear her watches on the weekend without compromising on the circumstances. And she's less influenceable. But again, scholarship, provenance, quality, condition is the common denominator for both our collections. The market is a very interesting laboratory, shall I say. There's lots of reactions happening and you don't understand why they're happening and when they're happening. Because it's made out of thousands and thousands of players who play a game which is called supply and demand, and that's the chemical reaction. And the chemical reaction means it's going up or it's going down. With vintage watches, we can compare two watches and say in-house caliber, 37 millimeters, 37 millimeters, automatic winding, beautiful dial, beautiful dial. One is worth $50,000, one is $5,000. And you say, why? And you cannot understand it. So you have to do a bit of digging. And suddenly you understand that it may have been triggered, the $50,000 watch, by a famous collector publicly saying, this is the future, I'm going after it. And suddenly you've got many collectors following this collector. I've seen it, it has happened, and it has worked. It doesn't mean that you and I can do it tomorrow and the same will happen. Now, when I specifically am asked what do I think is undervalued, many names come to my mind. Example, if you had to choose the three greatest icons of chronographs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, you would come up with the Rolex Daytona, the Omega Speedmaster, and probably the third one would be the Breitling Navitimer. Why is a Breitling Navitimer a few thousand US$ from the same period the Speedmaster has already reached the tens and the Daytona maybe even the hundreds of thousands of dollars? So one answer is the Breitling Navitimer. Another model that I think is, or brand that is regrettably undervalued, the vintage IWC Engineer, the reference 666 with the Peloton caliber, automatic self-winding caliber. This watch is, in my view, as handsome as a stainless steel Patek Philippe amagnetic 3417 and is going for 10% of the price. It used to be back then the non plus ultra. At Bahnhofstrasse in Zurich, they would put it in front of the Patek Philippe in the late 50s. And today you can pick them up at extremely attractive prices. Comes with the same Gayfrère bracelet, it has an in-house caliber, it's a 36 millimeter watch. What's wrong with it? I don't see anything wrong with it. So there are these sleeping beauties that are waiting to be kissed awake, and the day it happens, everybody will say, oh, I knew it all the time. There was a time in the 1980s that we should call maybe the first decade of vintage wristwatch collecting, where 90+% of all the great, complicated, important pieces were still in drawers of the families of the original owner. Not recognized for what they were worth, not recognized how important and rare they are. Why is it difficult? Because today, even though I could say without exaggeration to collector, please entrust me with the sale of this unique piece, I'm sure it will fetch a world record result. Many collectors answer me, why should I? Excuse me, you could achieve a great price. I don't need the money. And when money is not enough anymore to compensate a collector to part with an important watch, then we really have a problem, because at one moment comes sort of a state of starvation when nothing exciting is coming to the market. I think we're already seeing this to some extent. Now, coming back to an earlier question, if you can't have something that is gone because it's just not coming back, you automatically look for the next best. And this is why new brands, new models, new designs, new periods are discovered by the community. After all, saying, if the very best is in the museum, the second and third best that is available should hopefully satisfy me. Where is the market going in the future? I am utterly optimistic that rare, properly handmade, contemporary or vintage watches will continue to attract interest. It is, to me, one of the most ideal, close to perfect collectible for the 21st century. We travel more than ever before, therefore our art collections are often separated from us, or we are separated from our art collections. It's very discreet. You don't even see what I'm wearing today. So if I choose not to share it with anyone else, I can. Try not to share your vintage car that is parked outside with anyone entering or leaving the building. It's very easy to store. It's an object that can accompany me daily. And with the ever-growing sensitivity that the world has towards craftsmanship, history, heritage, I really think the fine handmade mechanical watch will continue to appeal to a broad audience.